priority for the Biden administration, and we're all living with the consequences. Of these arrests that have been made under Secretary Noem, nearly half of them have been convicted criminals, and others with final orders of deportation. These are people who either were criminals and did not want to appear in front of law enforcement, who were apprehended, or people who claimed asylum or some other legal benefit and lost their case and are under final orders of deportation, but were allowed to remain in the country under the Biden administration. Of these arrests that have been made under Secretary Noem, as I said, nearly half were convicted criminals. 1/3 of them have pending criminal charges. Nearly 1,200 of them were criminal gang members, and 39 were known as suspected terrorists. Now, the Department of Homeland Security isn't carrying out this critical mission alone. This is a whole of government approach, as it should be. The Department of Justice is partnering with the Department of Homeland Security on a new interagency initiative to crack down on international organized crime, known as Operation Take Back America. International gangs like MS-13 and Tren de Aragua have been wreaking havoc, death, and destruction in communities across America. MS-13, for those who are not familiar with that particular gang, is reputed to be the most dangerous gang on the planet. It's composed primarily of Salvadorian criminal aliens and has 30,000 members around the world, including 10,000 here in the United States. Their motto is, quote, kill, rape, control. And as I said, they are one of the largest and most dangerous street gangs in the United States. Many of their leaders are currently imprisoned in El Salvador for crimes like murder, kidnapping, and extortion. However, some on that side of the aisle or in the mainstream media have actually gone so far as to describe MS-13 as Boy Scouts in comparison with the destruction and devastation that's happened at the hands of Tren de Aragua, a Venezuelan gang known for human trafficking, kidnapping, and drug trafficking. This particular Venezuelan gang has been particularly aggressive in my home state of Texas, where the Department of Public Safety has arrested more than 40 of the gang's suspected members just last week. In New York, Tren de Aragua has been recruiting gang members from New York migrant shelters, increasing cell phone robbery activities and trafficking stolen phones back to their headquarters in South America. But the reason this gang became the topic of dinner tables across America was that they were responsible for the murders of both Laken Riley and a fellow Texan, Jocelyn Nungary. I can't imagine anyone would be anything except relieved that the Trump administration has prioritized removing these gang members from our country. The Department of Homeland Security and the Department of Justice have shown an ability and a commitment to lock up these dangerous international terrorists at breakneck speed. As part of this initiative, a recently created task force in Virginia, just across the river, arrested 247 individuals in 2 weeks. So this just is not a phenomenon in border states like mine. These people are embedded around the country, literally in every state. Among these arrests in Virginia was Henry Jose Villatoro Santos, one of MS-13's top gang leaders, who was charged in this instance with illegal gun possession. Another MS-13 leader, Jose Vargas Escobar, was arrested in New York just last week. This particular dangerous criminal was most recently arrested for his alleged involvement with 11 11 murders. But this was not his first run-in with the law. He was previously arrested and deported back in 2018, but due to the Biden administration's open border policies, he was able to illegally enter the country again. The Department of Homeland Security recently announced that in less than a week, ICE has arrested 68 gang members of the Venezuelan gang that I mentioned a moment ago. With Secretary Noem and Attorney General Bondi at the helm, I think we can all sleep more easily knowing that law enforcement is finally able to do their job, which is to enforce the law, something the Biden administration seemed positively allergic to. As a result, our homeland will be safer and more secure. The Trump administration is committed to dismantling these international criminal organizations that have created so much havoc and heartache throughout our country. It should be obvious and universal that keeping our citizens safe is not a partisan exercise. It's nothing more than common sense, and it's actually the responsibility of government to actually enforce the laws that Congress passes. Refusing to arrest and lock up criminals who never should have been in the country in the first place will go down in history as one of the biggest mistakes the Biden administration and Democrats have ever made. The Trump administration is rightly correcting the terrible mistakes of the Biden administration. The American people deserve to live in a country where they don't have to be fearful for their safety. And that's what they voted for last November the 5th. Parents should not have to worry about their children being seen or heard, never seen or heard from again, simply because they go for a jog like Lake and Riley did. Far too many innocent people have lost their lives because of the Biden administration's open border policies and failure to keep criminals and gangs out. It is incomprehensible to me that the President of the United States refused to enforce the laws and resulted in so much pain and misery and heartache among so many people in this country. The Trump administration, by contrast, arrests and deportation of criminal migrants here is part of the solution, not part of the problem. Mr. President, I'm confident the American people know nonsense when they hear it, even when it's broadcast over mainstream media. And the fear-mongering that we hear on the left about the Trump administration's efforts to keep all Americans safe are nothing more than that. Mr. President, I have 6 requests for committees to meet during today's session of the Senate. They've been approved by both the majority and minority leaders.
Duly noted. The senator from Washington is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. I ask unanimous consent to speak as if in morning business for up to 10 minutes.
Without objection.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, when it comes to new tax breaks for billionaires, Republicans are going to work around the clock, stay through the night. But when it comes to stopping Trump's trade war for good, when it comes to stopping a tax increase aimed squarely at working families, when it comes to stopping the complete uncertainty that is chipping away at confidence in our economy, most Republicans can't be bothered. Never mind that Trump is now pushing us into a recession and sending the markets whipsawing back and forth every time he tweets. Trump may be retreating now from some of his most outlandish tariffs, but make no mistake, his trade war is far from over. First of all, he is still taxing goods from every country across the board at 10% at least. That means higher prices and serious pain for families and small businesses across our country. Not to mention, he is only escalating this boneheaded trade war with China with a 145% tariff. There is no question we are in fierce competition with China. I chaired a committee hearing focused on this. We need to be competing to win. But that is not what Trump is doing. Do my Republican colleagues understand it is not setting America up for success to launch an all-out trade war with the second largest economy in the world on a whim? And while people might be temporarily relieved by this so-called pause on the even higher tariffs, the fact of the matter is that Trump is only delaying them. The threat of even larger taxes that American families simply cannot afford is still like a time bomb, set to blow up our economy in 90 days. And if Congress does not defuse that economic bomb, there is a real threat that it will blow up balance sheets for small businesses and farms, college savings accounts for our students, and your retirement savings, along with a lot more. And I have to emphasize the uncertainty, the constant, by the hour reversal of federal policy, that alone is already causing massive harm. How on earth are you supposed to build your business if your costs skyrocket on a tweet? How are you supposed to plan for retirement when the president is sending your 401k on a roller coaster ride every time he's in a bad mood? How are we ever going to rebuild trust with our trading partners across the world when the message the United States is sending right now is that our trade relationships are built on sand, and there is no logic to the tariffs the United States will impose? How are they supposed to feel good about negotiating with a country where one man can totally burn down the economy and Congress will not lift a finger to stop him? Instead of building stronger trade agreements, Trump is pushing our partners away and pushing them towards striking deals with China and our other adversaries. And mark my words, this chaotic chapter is not over, as much as Republicans want to pretend otherwise. I have been hearing from small businesses who are in an absolute panic because of Trump's tariffs threats. Car dealerships are seeing sales plummet because Trump is sending prices higher. Restaurants are trying to stock up on any goods they can because their ingredients are about to get more expensive. Our growers are bracing for rising operating costs and retaliatory tariffs, and that will drive up the prices at our grocery stores. 10% across-the-board tariffs are still bad enough to ruin families' finances. And while Republicans are showing with their own actions that they couldn't care more about shoveling trillions, and yes, that is trillions, at billionaires, Trump has said in his own words, that he, quote, couldn't care less about the pain his tariffs are already causing for Americans. I'm not kidding. He actually said that about automobile tariffs. This is what happens when you only have billionaires in charge. Because, of course, Trump doesn't care if the car prices go up by a couple $1,000s. Of course, Elon Musk doesn't care if your groceries are getting more expensive at the same time Republicans are cutting nutrition programs, by the way. Of course, the richest people in the world don't care if your nest egg is crushed or your small business shutters or your house gets foreclosed on or your kid can't go to college. Billionaires are going to be fine. After all, they're still getting a tax cut. But I wasn't set here to fight for billionaires. Actually, none of us were. We're here to fight for families back home. And they are already starting to get crushed by Trump's tariffs. And they are bracing for impact if Trump doubles down in 90 days. Or who knows, maybe Trump changes his mind again tomorrow. It's anyone's guess at this point, which is, by the way, the problem here. And another thing, if this is about American manufacturing, tell us. Why are plants and new investments being canceled? Why has Trump been freezing and outright canceling grants that we passed to support chips manufacturing or clean energy and more, killing American jobs? And let's keep in mind, these tariffs affect building and construction too. Trump is actually making it more expensive to build those factories in America. And don't forget, President Trump is still promising more tariffs. He said this week, he wants to put tariffs on medicine. Well, I got to tell you one thing I have never heard, not in a single meeting, not once in my entire career as a senator, is someone saying, gee, I really wish my prescriptions were more expensive. Drug costs are out of control. Families are already skipping meals or rationing doses. There are real stakes here. There's real damage already happening in this country because of Trump's new taxes and this ongoing chaos. We here cannot ignore this harm, especially when the threat is still there. When you're putting out a fire, you don't say, oh, great, it's smaller, I'm done. You keep going until the fire is put out. This fire is still raging. And if we don't act here, folks back home are the ones who are going to get burned. And before too long, in 90 days, we could see even worse price increases come roaring back. Because, let's be real, Trump has no exit strategy. That much is already painfully clear. It was clear when he announced tariffs that were calculated using ridiculous math. It was clear when he repeatedly doubled down on these threats against our allies. And it was clearer than ever when he backtracked on the most absurd tax hikes. This does not have the hallmarks of a grand strategy. And it's all the more reason why Congress, us, needs to step in and put this mess to an end. Trump's trade war is all pain and no plan. We could be passing legislation right here to reject this chaos. Here's what everyone, my colleagues, my constituents, the markets around the world all need to understand. This chaos will not be over for good unless we, here in Congress, vote to end it. Because whatever Trump tweets today, he can reverse tomorrow. Whatever deal he may strike one minute, he may rip up the next. We know this about him. He proves it at every opportunity. We here in Congress, we are the off-ramp if Republicans decide to be. We are the check on presidential power. We are the kill switch for Trump's trade war. And by the way, we're about to be out of town for 2 weeks. I cannot understand why any Republican would want to leave this business unfinished, want to leave this economic time bomb ticking, want to hand over our constitutionally granted power to impose tariffs. But I can tell you, for the next 2 weeks, I'm going to be going across my home state of Washington raising this alarm. I'm going to be meeting with families, small businesses, people who are paying the cost of Trump's new tax increase and who are going to see their world turned upside down if we do not take action to stop this from getting worse. And when we get back here in 2 weeks, you can bet your bottom dollar, I will lift those stories up as high as I can. I will call for action as loud as I can. And I'm going to keep a bright and burning spotlight on all of the chaos Trump has caused. And I will keep the pressure on all of our colleagues. I will not let Republicans off the hook on this. We can put an end to this. The costs are just going to be adding up. The carnage is going to continue to pile higher. How long do you want to wait? My vote, not one more second. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the floor.
The clerk will call the roll.
Ms. Alsobrooks.
Senator from Alaska is recognized.
Mr. President, request that proceedings under the quorum call be dispensed with.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yesterday was a day that really captured the attention of the world. We've all been talking about tariffs for a little bit, but yesterday was the day that really brought the focus to what was going on here in the United States. At 12:01 in the morning on Wednesday, President Trump's tariffs on the countries with which the United States has had the largest trade deficits went into effect, on top of the 10% tariff rates that had previously applied to all countries, which had been initiated on Saturday, April 5th. And then just hours later yesterday afternoon, the president announced a 90-day pause and lowered reciprocal tariffs to then 10%, and at the same time announced that he was raising tariffs on China to 125%. Now today it looks like that number is closer to 145%. So to say that this has been a dizzying week in Washington, D.C. is probably an understatement. Those of us that are following the markets, it has been, again, it's been somewhat head-spinning. And I'm not going to comment here on the floor today about the negotiating tactics of President Trump. I think he is legendary and really world-renowned for his skills at that, his skills in bringing nations to the table. We're seeing some of this play out literally as we speak. Other countries that have approached the administration to have discussions about tariffs. This is a unique kind of leverage, most certainly, keeping those across the table off balance, but bringing the world potentially to the brink of a ruinous trade war certainly qualifies as a very unique point of leverage. The effort to try to reshore manufacturing here in this country is important, it's admirable, and it's something that we should all be working towards. But I think there has been general agreement that the message from the administration has been decidedly mixed, which leads to further confusion among our trading partner and our allies. If nobody understands where the finish line is, it's hard to reach it. I don't want to focus my comments here this afternoon about these possible strategies and end results of these policies so much, but I want to focus more on the process of how these tariffs were imposed, because I believe it is yet another example of Congress choosing to cede its powers to the executive branch. And if the global implications of these tariffs have shown us nothing else, it's that measures that are as important as these should be considered by the 535 elected individuals that are in tune with the American people, rather than vesting that with just one individual acting unilaterally. It's under Article 1, Section 8 of our United States Constitution that clearly enumerates that Congress shall have the power to lay and collect taxes, duties, imposts, and excises. In other words, the power to levy tariffs rests with us here in the Congress. So why have we seen the executive take control over tariff rates? And the answer lies in almost a centuries-long series of bills that we have seen here that Congress has voluntarily enacted and laid down its authority for the executive to pick up. Following the disastrous Smoot-Hawley Act of 1930, which plunged our nation deeper into a Great Depression, Congress passed the following legislation. First, it was the Reciprocal Trade Agreements Act of 1934, which authorized the president to make limited tariff rates without congressional review on top of negotiating bilateral reciprocal trade agreements. Then it was the Trade Expansion Act of 1962, which broadened the president's trade powers to include multilateral trade agreements, while also allowing the president to unilaterally impose tariffs if imports could threaten national security. Then the Trade Act of 1974, which allowed the president to protect U.S. workers by adjusting tariffs if foreign countries engaged in unfair trade practices. And then just a few years later, it was the International Emergency Economic Powers Act of 1977, which gives the president authorities to address declared emergencies if, quote, unusual and extraordinary, close quote, threats exist to national security, foreign policy, or to the economy. So those powers include, you probably guessed it, the authority to regulate or prohibit imports. So in his April 2nd executive order, President Trump declared a national emergency because of a lack of reciprocity in our bilateral trade relationships and our trading partners' economic policies that suppress domestic wages. He is authorized to do so under the National Emergencies Act of 1976. So I want to be clear about all of this. I know some people might not like it, but all of what he has done is clearly above board. The president is clearly within his powers to impose tariffs on our allies, like Mexico and Canada and the EU, just as much as he is with our adversaries, like China and Russia and Iran. And President Trump and President Biden before him took this route because Congress has largely relegated tariff authority to the president through the laws that effectively cede to the executive. And my friends, it's just one more example of Congress abdicating instead of legislating. In my time here, I've seen a troubling pattern in both bodies where the party that controls the White House seems all too comfortable relinquishing authority to the president and then rubber stamping whatever policies the executive wants enshrined into law. Both Democrats and Republicans in Congress have deferred to the executive to call the shots, in my view, for far too long. Now, we use the phrase around here a lot, co-equal branches of government. I use it all the time. But the reality is, Congress was created in Article 1. Article 1 of the Constitution. We're given far more authority than the executive. All you need to do is look in your handy-dandy little pocket Constitution. Ours is a lot longer. But look at the authorities that we have. Congress may impeach and remove a president and members of the judiciary. Congress can override a presidential veto of legislation. Congress appropriates the money that funds the operation of all branches of government. And it is Congress that, again, needs to lay and collect taxes, duties, imposts, and excises. So we also say a lot around here that business loves certainty. I would suggest that the country's entire tariff regime being subject to the whims of one individual lends anything but certainty. And that's why I have signed on to Senators Grassley and Senator Cantwell's legislation. They call it the Trade Review Act of 2025. And it would reclaim this branch's authority and duty to help manage tariffs as outlined in the U.S. Constitution. The bill requires notice to the Congress of the imposition of or increase in any tariffs, requires notice to the Congress in 48 hours. And with that congressional notification, it has to include an explanation of the president's reasoning for imposing or raising the tariffs, as well as providing an analysis of potential impact on American businesses and consumers. And I can tell you, the Alaskans that I'm talking to back home would really like the last part of this, an analysis of how is this going to impact us. And then another provision within the Grassley-Cantwell Act is Within 60 days, Congress would pass a joint resolution of approval on the new tariff. Otherwise, all new tariffs on imports would expire after that deadline. So what this act effectively would do would be to reaffirm Congress's role with regards to tariff. It allows for a greater engagement, if you will, between the executive and the congressional branch, allows for the debate, allows for that engagement, allows for that understanding. So again, I'm hearing from folks all over back home because they're worried. We already pay high costs for just about everything in Alaska, but they're worried about what it's going to mean for groceries, for cars, for furniture, electronics, coffee. We had a visit with a group of high school students on the steps yesterday, and they were from all over the state. We had some from Ketchikan all the way out to King Cove and out in the YK Delta. And the first question from one of the 16-year-olds in that group was, can you tell me what's going on with tariffs? How is this going to impact us? And you know, I really appreciated that question from that 16-year-old who's paying attention to what's going on. He's got questions. He's here in Washington, D.C., and he's figuring he's going to get some answers from his senator. Alaskans are facing consequences. They kind of want to know that they have a voice in it, and their voice is us. It's their senator. It's their representative. That's our role here. Now, it's been suggested, and the president himself has issued a statement about this legislation. He's indicated that he does not support it and that he would veto it. That is absolutely within his power. But we also have powers. We also have powers here in Congress, and we need to assert them. And so I would hope that this bill is maybe just the start, maybe just the toe in the water here, where we're starting to see Congress reassert its authority. Because if we don't stand up for the institution, if we don't stand up for the legislative branch of our government by debating this issue and others, but holding votes, debating, let's debate this, let's have a vote on the Trade Review Act. Because if we just sit back, if we don't assert our authority, we've only got ourselves to blame when we don't like the direction that may be taken. The executive has slowly arrogated more and more power since the end of World War II, and it's dramatically accelerated post 9/11. But we here in Congress have stood by, and we've accepted it. We've said it's okay. I think it's time for Congress to reassert itself, whether it's on tariffs, whether it's on the power of appropriation, whether it's overseeing the bodies, the agencies that we as a body have authorized. So let's legislate. Let's remember our role is to legislate. We owe that to those that we represent as well as to this institution for the long-term good of the nation. And with that, Mr. President, I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
The senator from North Carolina is recognized.
Mr. President, I rise today to honor the life of a dear friend and public servant, Egbert Lawrence Davis III, who went home to be with his Heavenly Father on March 17th, surrounded by his loving family. Everyone who knew Lawrence knew that he loved God, he loved North Carolina, and he loved his country so much that he chose to dedicate his life's work to serving the great state that he called home. Lawrence served 2 terms in the North Carolina General Assembly as a state representative and 2 terms as a state senator. And throughout his career in public service, he served as the chair of the North Carolina Family Business Forum, the president of the Rotary Club of Raleigh, and a board member of the North Carolina Bar Association, just to name a few. But when asked what he would consider to be the highlight of his career, he said his marriage to his beloved wife, Sandra Holderness. Their enduring love for one another still remains a powerful example for all, including myself, who were fortunate enough to witness their marriage. And most of all, Lawrence was known as a man of faith who led his life walking hand in hand with Jesus Christ. He was known by his church community as a beloved deacon, elder, Sunday school teacher, choir member, and Stephen minister. He lived a life of quiet strength and unwavering faith, continually leaning on the Lord for guidance. Though he's no longer with us, his legacy lives on through his 4 devoted children, 6 cherished grandchildren, and beloved great-granddaughter. Mr. President, I'd like to close by reciting a verse that was included in Lawrence's obituary that I believe reflects the man that was to all who knew him, and it was from Micah 6:8. He has shown you, O mortal, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you? To act justly, to love mercifully, and to walk humbly with your God. I yield the floor. Mr. President.
North Carolina.
As if in legislative session and notwithstanding Rule 22, I ask unanimous consent, the Senate proceed to the consideration of S-Res 170, which is at the desk.
The clerk will report.
S-Res 170, resolution to authorize representation by the Senate Legal Counsel in the case of Desmond Bellard v. Ronald Wyden, U.S. Senator.
Without objection, the Senate will proceed.
I ask unanimous consent that the resolution be agreed to, the preamble agreed to, and that motions to reconsider be made and laid upon the table with no intervening action or debate.
Without objection.
Mr. President.
Senator from Nebraska. I'm sorry, New Hampshire.
Well, it's an in-state. Mr. President, is the Senate in quorum call?
We are not.
Okay, thank you.
Those states are a long way away.
Yes, that's true. We have higher mountains than Nebraska and New Hampshire. Mr. President, it wasn't that long ago that Sudan was on a path to recovery after decades of violence and civil war. Back in 2018, Sudanese citizens took to the streets to protest the conditions in their country. This movement pushed Omar al-Bashir, who was indicted by the ICC for directing a campaign of mass killing and rape, out of power. And this set the country on a course for a better future. But sadly, that future was disrupted when the military overthrew the civilian-led government of Sudan. And then, 2 years ago, the Sudanese armed forces, led by General al-Burnham, and the Rapid Support Forces, led by General Hamedi, plunged Sudan into war. In the 2 years since, over 150,000 people have died, and 12 million more have been displaced. And you can see this poster reflects the results of what's happening in Sudan. In just 2 years, 12 million more people have been displaced and are in camps. This is actually one of the nicer camps. With acute famine levels at historic highs, 30 million people are in desperate need of humanitarian aid. And we can see some of the Sudanese people with their dishes lined up to get some assistance. Now, as so often happens during war, the impact has been especially devastating to women and girls. During raids by the armed factions, women and girls have been abducted and forced into sexual and domestic slavery. One UN report found gender-based violence skyrocketed by 288% last year. So, again, we can see the impact. According to UNICEF, 221 children have been raped, including a case involving a 1-year-old baby. And if this is true, we just can't ignore it as another horrific detail of a distant conflict. The world is watching, and we must hold the people who are perpetrating these acts accountable for their crimes. The United States government has determined that both the Sudanese armed forces and the Rapid Support Forces have committed war crimes and crimes against humanity during fighting in Sudan. And the Rapid Support Forces have led a campaign of ethnic cleansing in Darfur. In January of 2025, the U.S. Treasury Department took a positive step. It sanctioned the leader of the Rapid Support Forces and the leader of the Sudanese Armed Forces for their army's lethal attacks on civilians in Sudan. But more needs to be done. Ceasefire after ceasefire has failed. Peace negotiations have stalled. And outside countries, the UAE, Turkey, Iran, as well as Russia and China, continue to send weapons to the factions. Now, why? Well, because Russia doesn't want to give up its port access on the Red Sea. China doesn't want to abandon the nearly $6 billion of investments it's made in Sudan since 2005. And the UAE doesn't want to abandon Sudan's wartime gold trade. According to mining industry sources and research by SwissAid, nearly all of Sudan's gold trade flows through the UAE. The United States needs to stand up and say, enough is enough. And for people who say, well, what difference does it make? That's Africa, that's a long way away from the United States. Why does it matter? Well, because sadly, what happens in Africa, what happens in Sudan, doesn't stay in Sudan. If you can't be outraged because of the moral horror of what's happening there. You should be outraged because the terrorism, the potential disease, that can cross the borders of Sudan. That can come to the United States, and we've seen that too often in the past. Now, as ranking member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, I'm committed to working with my colleagues on both sides of the aisle, here in Congress, as well as with folks in the Trump administration, because we must hold these groups accountable for their war crimes. We must support them in ending the violence. Right now, both sides in the war continue to bomb, to raid, to siege schools, markets, and hospitals. The Sudanese armed forces are intentionally denying humanitarian aid. They're blocking medicine and other relief items. And the Rapid Support Forces continue to lead an ethnically charged campaign of violence in Darfur. And sadly, so many of the foreign assistance programs that we had in place have been ended or are under review. The U.S., the Trump administration, and Congress must create a clear policy to address this conflict. We must resume foreign assistance to the region and Sudan to limit further humanitarian suffering, and we must set aside our differences, bring an end to the violence, and renew our commitment to setting Sudan back on the path to a civilian-led democracy. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the floor.
President.
I recognize the senator from Iowa.
This month of April is National Donate Life Month. This month is time to raise awareness about the life-saving importance of organ donation. There are over 103,000 Americans on the National Organ Transplant waiting list. We should have confidence our organ transplant system is efficient and fair. Sadly, my oversight dating way back to 2005 has uncovered decades of corruption and mismanagement in this donation system. It has left vulnerable patients to die on waiting lists while unused organs from generous American donors go to waste. Speaking of waiting lists, I've been concerned about the reports of those on the wait list being skipped over. This furthers the distrust in organ donation system. Through my bipartisan oversight and also the 2023 United States Organ Procurement Transplantation Network law, the federal government is making long overdue changes so that we take care and clean this mess up. The law improved the management and the oversight of our organ transplant system and encouraged participation from competent and transparent contractors. To build on to those reforms, in March, the President signed a continuing resolution that provided authority for the Department of Health and Human Services to collect registration fees from organ transplant member institutions. This thus ensures the 2023 law can be implemented properly. I encourage all Americans to consider being an organ donor and understand the impact that it can have on saving lives. And of course, in additional oversight of the new legislation, I'm keeping my very close eye on how the federal government is implementing these new laws to give more people the chance of life-saving transplant. I yield the floor.
The clerk will call the roll.
Ms. Also Brooks.
I don't need a copy of this.
Madam President,
The senator from Montana.
I ask that the quorum call be vitiated.
Without objection.
I ask unanimous consent that roll call vote begin now.
Without objection. The question occurs on the nomination.
Ask.
Is there a sufficient second? There appears to be. The clerk will call the roll.
Ms. Also Brooks, Ms. Baldwin, Mr. Banks, Mr. Barrasso, Mr. Bennett, Mrs. Blackburn, Mr. Blumenthal, Ms. Blunt Rochester, Mr. Booker, Mr. Bozeman, Mrs. Britt.
Aye.
Mr. Budd.
Yes.
Ms. Cantwell. Mrs. Capito. Mr. Cassidy. Ms. Collins. Mr. Coons. Mr. Cornyn. Ms. Cortez Masto. Mr. Cotton. Mr. Kramer. Mr. Crapo. Mr. Cruz. Mr. Curtis. Mr. Deans. Ms. Duckworth. Mr. Durbin. Ms. Ernst. Mr. Fetterman. Mrs. Fisher. Mr. Gallego. Mrs. Gillibrand. Mr. Graham. Mr. Grassley. Mr. Haggerty. Ms. Hassan. Mr. Hawley. Mr. Heinrich. Mr. Hickenlooper. Ms. Hirono. Mr. Hoven. Mr. Husted. Mrs. Hyde-Smith. Mr. Johnson. Mr. Justice. Mr. Kane. Mr. Kelly. Mr. Kane, Mr. Kelly, Mr. Kennedy, Mr. Kim, Mr. King, Ms. Klobuchar, Mr. Langford, Mr. Lee, Mr. Lujan, Ms. Lummis, Mr. Markey, Mr. Marshall, Mr. McConnell, Mr. McCormick. Thank you. Mr. Merkley. Mrs. Moody. Mr. Moran. Mr. Moreno. Mr. Mullen. Ms. Murkowski. Mr. Murphy. Mrs. Murray. Mr. Ossoff. Mr. Padilla. Mr. Paul. Mr. Peters. Mr. Reed. Mr. Ricketts. Mr. Risch. Ms. Rosen. Mr. Rounds. Mr. Sanders. Mr. Schatz. Mr. Schiff. Mr. Schmidt. Mr. Schumer. Mr. Scott of Florida. Mr. Scott of South Carolina. Mrs. Shaheen. Mr. Sheehy. Ms. Slotkin. Ms. Smith. Mr. Sullivan. Mr. Thune. Mr. Tillis. Mr. Tuberville. Mr. Van Hollen. Mr. Warner. Mr. Warnock. Ms. Warren. Mr. Welch. Mr. Whitehouse. Mr. Wicker. Mr. Wyden. Mr. Young. Senators voting in the affirmative: Banks, Britt, Budd, Capito, Collins, Crapo, Curtis, Daines, Fisher, Graham, Grassley, Hoven, Johnson, Kennedy, Langford, Lummis, Marshall, McConnell, Moreno, Ricketts, Sheehy, and Thune. Senators voting in the negative: Alsobrooks, Baldwin, Coons, Durbin, Gillibrand, Hassan, Hirono, Kane, Reed, Schiff, Schumer, Smith, Van Hollen, Warner, and Whitehouse. Mr. Hickenlooper, Mr. Hickenlooper. No. Ms. Blunt-Rochester, Ms. Blunt-Rochester. No. Ms. Cortez-Masto, Ms. Cortez-Masto. No. Ms. Rosen, Ms. Rosen. No. Mr. Schatz, Mr. Schatz. No. Mr. Markey, Mr. Markey. No. Mr. Barrasso, Mr. Barrasso. Aye. Mr. Warnock, Mr. Warnock. No. Mr. Welch, Mr. Welch. No. Mr. Husted. Mr. Husted, aye. Mr. Tuberville. Mr. Tuberville, aye. Mr. Padilla. Mr. Padilla, no. Mr. Paul. Mr. Paul, aye. Mrs. Murray, no. Mr. Booker, no. Mr. Lee, aye. Mr. Cornyn, aye. Mr. Lujan, no. Mr. Cotton, aye. Mr. Risch, aye. Mr. Young, aye. Mr. Scott of Florida, aye. Mr. Cassidy, aye. Mr. Bennett, no. Mr. Sullivan, aye. Mr. Peters, no. Mr. Ossoff, no. Mr. Murphy, no. Mr. Haggerty, aye. Mr. Fetterman, no. Ms. Murkowski, aye. Ms. Slotkin, no. Ms. Ernst, aye. Mr. Rounds, aye. Mr. Kelly, no. Mr. Kim, no. Mr. Wyden, no. Mr. Kramer, aye. Mrs. Blackburn, aye. Mr. McCormick, aye. Ms. Duckworth, no. Mr. Heinrich, no. Mrs. Hyde-Smith, aye. Mr. Justice, aye. Mr. Hawley, aye. Ms. Klobuchar, no. Mr. Tillis, aye. Mr. Gallego, no. Mrs. Shaheen, no. Mr. King, no. Ms. Warren, no. Mrs. Moody, aye. Ms. Cantwell, no. Mr. Cruz, aye. Mr. Merkley, no. Mr. Scott of South Carolina, aye. Mr. Blumenthal, no. Mr. Wicker. Mr. Wicker, aye. Mr. Schmidt, aye. Thank you, Tony.
On this vote, the yeas are 50, the nays are 46, and the nominee is confirmed. Under the previous order, the motion to reconsider is made and laid upon the table, and the President will immediately be notified of the Senate's actions. I recognize the Senator from Mississippi.
Recognition to make a unanimous consent request.
Without objection.
Nope. Mr. President, actually, I'm going to ask unanimous consent that we go ahead and confirm General Kane as Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. But I must say that I do so with mixed feelings. On the one hand, we need a Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff immediately. And there's overwhelming support on the Democratic side and Republican side for this nomination. On the other hand, passage of this confirmation would pretty much end our week, and that would prevent us from getting a lot of work done later on this afternoon and into tonight and tomorrow if we have to stay till tomorrow to confirm this very important officer as Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. So in a way, we can have it either way. But frankly, to stay here and get some Congressional Review Act resolutions done so that we can end a number of the pernicious regulations foisted off on the American people and on our economy by the Biden administration, that has a lot of appeal also. So with that in mind, and in an effort to accommodate members on both sides of the aisle who really believe we can finish our business today, I ask unanimous consent that the cloture motions filed yesterday on executive calendar number 75, numbers 75 and 74, making General John Kane Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, ripen at 3 p.m. time today.
Is there objection?
Object.
Objection is heard.
Mr. President, I may have other unanimous consent requests, but if I could be heard on this matter for another moment, I would seek recognition for that purpose.
The Senator is recognized.
And I'm happy to yield to my friend from Alaska, who has now vacated the floor. I thought we had this more synchronized, Mr. President. But let me say this. There was a vote earlier this week in the Armed Services Committee. It passed the Armed Services Committee with overwhelming Democrat and Republican support. 23 yeses and only 4 noes. So there's really no reason to delay this any longer. And frankly, there's so much going on around the world with the 4 powers that constitute an axis of aggression to the United States, that we really should give the President the choice that has been endorsed so overwhelmingly by a bipartisan majority of the Armed Services Committee. And with that, having communicated better now with my dear colleague from Alaska, I would yield to the junior senator from the state of Alaska.
Mr. President.
I recognize the Senator from Alaska.
Mr. President, I certainly hope my Democratic colleagues can let us move forward on this. We're going to stay all night until we get the President's Chairman of the Joint Chiefs confirmed. Now, look, I know there was some concern about removing General Brown, C.Q. Brown. I actually really like General C.Q. Brown. I thought he did a good job. I've publicly stated a number of times that he's served his country very well. But here's the deal. The President of the United States is entitled to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs that he wants. And you look at history, senior military commanders on Democrat side, on Republican side, if the President doesn't feel comfortable with them, he has the right to remove them and move on. That's just our history. That's happened with Democrats. George W. Bush wasn't comfortable. General Peter Pace, he's a Marine. I happen to respect him a lot. He said, hey, I'm not comfortable. I'm moving to another chairman. President Obama fired 2 very senior 4-star generals inside of 2 years. One was General McChrystal, one of the most seasoned warriors, in a generation of warfighters. And he removed him. And so President Trump clearly had the authority to remove General Brown. He has now put forward General Kane, who, by the way, everybody on the committee, Armed Services Committee, thought he did a great job. He's going to get a really big vote here. So why are we delaying it? I don't know. Doesn't make any sense to me. President deserves a senior military advisor. That's what the chairman of the Joint Chiefs is, his senior military advisor. The president needs to feel comfortable with that person. That person is actually out of the chain of command. And we've seen throughout history that when the president doesn't feel comfortable, he can remove one general and bring in another one. And that's what's happened here, and we should confirm General Kane immediately. I think he's going to do a really, really good job. Matter of fact, Mr. President, I've interviewed, sat down with, served under hundreds of flag officers. General Kane is one of the most impressive I've ever met. So we need to get on with it. And, there's these press stories about, why President Trump removed General Brown. I think it's just because he wanted to have a general who he trusts and feels comfortable with, and that's exactly his right as the commander-in-chief. So we should move on. General Kane's going to get a very, I think, significant bipartisan vote. He should. And if the minority leader wants to object, we'll just grind it out all night and get it done.
I wonder if I could reclaim my time to ask my distinguished friend from Alaska a question.
The senator from Alaska has the floor, and he can yield for a question.
I yield to my good friend from Mississippi.
Yes, that's correct. Well, I would then ask my distinguished friend from Alaska, isn't it a fact that General Kane, time and again, has demonstrated his aptitude and leadership abilities while actually deployed in combat zones, leading service members in Iraq and Syria, and while serving in various special operations force units, and also in the intelligence community, and that he ran some of our most secretive programs for the security of Americans?
That's absolutely my good friend from Mississippi, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, by the way. The chairman of the Armed Services Committee, by the way, a senator who knows probably more about the military than anyone else here, has it exactly right. General Kane has this breadth of experience, not just a fighter pilot with thousands of hours, combat hours in flight, but has worked very closely with our intel services, has very significant combat experience in Iraq and Syria. Very interestingly, Mr. President, and the chairman of the Armed Services Committee knows this, has private sector experience. And you would say, well, why does that matter? It actually matters a lot because of our military and the need to integrate our very powerful private sector. So he brings a wealth of experience that, to be honest, in my 10 years in this position as a U.S. Senator on the Armed Services Committee, in my 30 years in the Marine Corps, I have never seen a general that brings it all together. So I think he's going to be outstanding and exceptional.
If the gentleman would further yield, I just wondered if the gentleman would yield to the distinguished minority leader to ascertain how this matter is going to be resolved differently if we wait until tomorrow.
I yield.
The gentleman has the floor. Perhaps he would do so.
Mr. President, I would yield to the distinguished minority leader, and maybe having him watch this distinguished debate between me and the chairman of the Armed Services Committee has convinced him to bowed to the inevitable, and that's the confirmation of the chairman of the Joint Chiefs.
Senator from Alaska has the floor. Senator from New York is not seeking recognition.
Maybe this minority leader will explain why he's objecting, given that we just laid out very cogent, strong reasons that we need to move forward on confirming the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Right now, it's a very dangerous world. Why would we wait? I'm curious on what the minority leader says. Now, I yield the floor if he has an answer.
Senator, yield the floor.
Senator yields the floor to answer that inquiry that I asked you.
The clerk will call the roll.
Ms. Alsobrooks.
Senator from Alaska.
Ask that the quorum call be vitiated.
Is there objection? There is an objection.
Mr. President.
Senator from Alaska.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent to vitiate the quorum call.
Is there objection? Without objection.
Mr. President, I just want the American people who are watching, those who care about our national security, the chairman of the Armed Services Committee just had a colloquy here on the floor talking about why we needed to move the chairman of the Armed Service, or the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, to get confirmed on the Senate here. And I, and the chairman of the Armed Services Committee, respectfully asked the question of the minority leader, Democratic minority leader, why are you blocking this? And you may have seen he just walked off the floor. He didn't answer. I don't know if he has an answer. If he has an answer, it sure would be good to hear what the answer is, because we need President Trump's chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff confirmed. And I bet he gets a strong bipartisan support in terms of his confirmation, because he's very qualified. And yet, without any explanation, the minority leader of the U.S. Senate just said, I object, and he walked off the floor. I hope the press reports on that. Holy cow, that's kind of big news. And if we have to be here all night, jamming down on them to get the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff confirmed, because our country needs it during a very dangerous time, a general who's immensely qualified, then that's what we're going to do. But it sure would be easier to just agree with us, start moving on the boat, and get this highly qualified general confirmed as President Trump's chairman of the Joint Chiefs. But what you just witnessed, for anyone watching, the American people watching, was a non-debate. My good friend from Mississippi and I were describing why we need to move this forward. The minority leader of the U.S. Senate, who has the power to do it, just said, I object. Normally, on the Senate floor, when someone objects, they explain why. But he didn't want to do it. Just walked off the floor. So that's what we just witnessed. A little bit unusual, particularly when it comes to a confirmation that's so important. There's very few confirmations that the U.S. Senate does that are more important than confirming the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. And I guess the Democrats are going to block it for now, and we will go all night to make sure President Trump has his principal senior military advisor, which he needs during these dangerous times. I yield the floor.
Clerk will call the roll.
Ms. Alsobrooks.
Panama last night. We were at the Panama Canal.